Vietnam and France aim for stronger economic cooperation. And later on, Vietnam's active in pushing for enhanced GMS cooperation. Hello there, you're tuning into another edition of BizLine on VTV International. I'm your host, Hoàng Hằng, and as usual, we will take a look at some economic highlights over the past week. As part of his official visit to France, Party General Secretary Nguyen on Monday witnessed the signing of several cooperation documents together with President of the National Assembly of France, François de Rugy. Notably, among these documents was a memorandum of understanding between Vietnam's Intellectual Property Department and France's National Industrial Property Institute, an agreement between Vietnam Airlines and Air France, and Air France Industry KLM Engineering and Maintenance, and other MOU on purchasing 24 aircrafts between Bamboo Airline, FLC of Vietnam and France Airbus. Party General Secretary Nguyen also met with French Prime Minister Edouard Philippe. Both leaders emphasized that economic cooperation always plays an important role in bilateral relations and agreed to strengthen economic, commercials and investment ties to match politic and cultural ties. Both sides expressed their desire to accelerate the signing and ratification of the EU-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement this year. And here are some other highlights in economic news in the past week. On March 29th, the 6th Greater Mekong Subregion Summit, or GMS6, started with the senior officials meeting, focusing on seeking agreement on documents in preparations for the summit. The next day, the first ever GMS Business Summit, an initiative by the host country Vietnam aimed at enhancing dialogue between businesses and governments, took place with the participation of leaders of 6 GMS countries, including Vietnamese Prime Minister Nguyen and 2,600 businesses in and outside the region. Prime Minister Phuc stressed that GMS cooperation will boost economic development, considering the regional population and GDP. Delegates agree that the driving force of GMS economies must be startup, micro, small and medium-sized enterprises and women-led enterprises. On Saturday, Prime Minister Nguyen chairs the GMS6 summit in Hanoi that was participated by leaders from GMS and ASEAN countries, the Asian Development Bank and the World Bank. The GMS6 summit theme, leveraging 25 years of cooperation, building an integrated, sustainable and prosperous GMS, aims to celebrate the 25th founding anniversary of the GMS and identify cooperation for establishing regional prosperity, integration and sustainable development. The Prime Minister said Vietnam highly appreciates the implementation of the Hanoi Action Plan 2018-2022, along with the Regional Investment Framework consisting of more than 220 investment programs and technical assistance programs with values of $65 billion. During her official visit to the Netherlands, National Assembly Chairwoman Nguyễn Thị Kim Ngân on Monday met with Queen of the Netherlands in The Hague. The National Assembly Chairwoman expressed her hope that the Queen, as the UN Secretary General's Special Envoy on Comprehensive Finance for Development, would help mobilize financial and technical resources from the UN and other international organizations to help Vietnam be more efficient in implementing its financial services. Queen Maxima lauded Vietnam's effort in developing a national strategy on inclusive growth to promote full access to financial services and urged the Vietnamese government to approve a national strategy on comprehensive finance and to establish a coordination committee for the strategy. Vietnam's economy has continued to maintain its positive trend since the end of last year. GDP growth so far this year is expected to hit 7%, the highest for a decade. These facts were given at the meeting of the Macroeconomic Management Group chaired by Deputy Prime Minister Vương Đình Huệ on Tuesday. The construction industry is the driving force for economic growth with an increase of 11%. Exports also increased at a high rate of 23%. The number of newly established enterprises reached the highest level over the past 7 years, with nearly 27,000 new businesses recorded. The profits of many banks in the first quarter of this year are estimated to rise higher than the same period last year, thanks to significant credit growth. According to the State Bank of Vietnam, credit growth of the entire banking system by the end of February increased by 2.04% compared to late last year to 150 trillion Vietnam dong, or $6.5 billion US. In the first quarter of last year, credit growth was at 2.81%. Banks said that another factor that has helped them prosper has been positive bad debt settlement, as banks have not had to spend as much on risk provisioning as in previous years. So far this year, total new and increased foreign direct investment, or FDI, has decreased sharply compared to the same period last year. Specifically, according to a report from the Ministry of Planning and Investment, in the first quarter, Vietnam has had 618 FDI projects with newly granted investment certificates. Total registered capital of foreign investors is $5.8 billion US, equal to 75.2% over the same period. Disbursement is estimated at $3.88 billion. This quarter, South Korea ranks first with more than 31% of FDI in Vietnam. Grab officially announced on Monday that it had acquired Uber's Southeast Asia operations. As part of the acquisition, Uber will take a 27.5% stake in Grab, and Uber CEO Dara Khorao-Shani will join Grab's board. Grab said that it will integrate Uber's ride-sharing and food delivery business in the region into its platform. Uber applications in Southeast Asia will continue to operate until April the 7th. Uber Eats will continue to operate until the end of May this year before moving to the GrabFood platform. Those are some economic highlights of the week. Up next, we will take a look at the recently held Greater Mekong Subregion Summit, or GMS6, and Vietnam's participation in pushing for enhanced GMS cooperation. Vietnam recently hosted the 6th Greater Mekong Subregion Summit, or GMS6, in Hanoi from March the 29th to the 31st. The event aimed to celebrate the 25th founding anniversary of the GMS program and define strategic cooperation to build a region of prosperity, integration, and sustainable development. As an active member, Vietnam has taken part in developing initiatives for enhanced ties within the Greater Mekong Subregion, or GMS, to boost economic growth, strengthen economic connectivity, and a poverty reduction effort in the region. After 25 years of economic cooperation under the GMS cooperation framework, what are the achievements of GMS and the goals going forward for its member, including Vietnam? BizLine this week tries to find out. But first, let's review the GMS cooperation mechanism and achievements in the following clip. The Greater Mekong Subregion is an area interconnected by the Mekong River, which covers an expanse of 2.6 million square kilometers and has a total population of 340 million. The GMS cooperation mechanism was initiated in 1992 with the support of the Asian Development Bank, which included Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Thailand, and China, with 2 representative provinces of Yunnan and Guangxi.
Trong tất cả những cái cơ chế hợp tác của khu vực tiểu vùng Mekong mở rộng, cơ chế GMS là cơ chế hợp tác mang lại hiệu quả tốt nhất. Nó đi đúng theo những cái xu hướng của liên kết khu vực. Những cái dự án và những chương trình phát triển của GMS đấy nó dựa trên những cái tiềm năng sẵn có, những sự kết nối tự nhiên về địa lý, về văn hóa, về các loại tiềm năng như nông nghiệp, như du lịch.
After more than 2 decades of operations, the GMS program has helped to promote economics, trade, and investment cooperation among members while narrowing the development gap within ASEAN and enhancing the voices of its members. We will discuss GMS program, its gains, existing challenges, as well as future prospects with our guest today, Director Cooperation for Southeast Asia for Asian Development Bank, Mr. Alfredo Perdiguro. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Now, first of all, let's give us an overview of the GMS program. What are the priorities of GMS over the past years?
The Greater Mekong subregion program was created 25 years ago and had three main objectives. One has been to enhance connectivity among the countries in the region. There are 6 member countries of the Greater Mekong subregion program, and those countries are working together to connect better with the support of the GMS program. The second objective was to enhance competitiveness of the 6 countries, and the third was to have a better sense of community and develop the local communities. This is what we call the 3 Cs: connectivity, competitiveness, and community. And within each of those 3 Cs, there are a number of priority sectors that the program is supporting. For example, under connectivity, the program has been promoting the development of transport connectivity and also power interconnectivity. Under the competitiveness section of the program, we have been promoting areas such as agriculture development, urban development, trade facilitation, and also tourism. And under the third leg of the program, the third C, which is, we also have been promoting health and the environment.
Why is there such a strong emphasis on the 3 Cs, connectivity, competitiveness, and community?
Well, of course, the first one, the one on connectivity, is extremely important because if 25 years ago the countries were not connected, it was very difficult really to move from one country to the other. It was almost impossible to cross some of the borders. So that had created huge challenges for trade and for investment, for the movement of tourists. So it became very important to enhance that connectivity. In the case of competitiveness, the development, for example, of the agriculture sector, where the majority of the population of the GMS countries still are working and living, it becomes really very important. But there are many other sectors, such as tourism and also the development of the urban areas, that are vital to enhance that these 6 countries become really competitive. In the last case, the case of, for example, health, there are important areas which now have become even more important because with the movement of people, increased movement of people, there is higher risk also, risk for the environment and risk for the possibility of transmittal of communicable diseases. So that has required the program to really emphasize and put more effort on those sectors.
Now, as a member of GMS, has Vietnam played an active role in the cooperation framework?
Vietnam has played a very, very important role. Vietnam has always been in the program from the very beginning and has been leading many of the actions, has been actively participated in many different areas and in all the sectors. Just to put you an example, actually, we have what we call the economic corridors, which is very famous initiative under the GMS cooperation program. Vietnam is a member of the 3 economic corridors and all the transport corridors in the GMS. Without the support of Vietnam, this program would have never been successful.
As one of the 3 main focuses of the GMS program in infrastructure connectivity, transportation cooperation has improved the development potential of the 6 GMS countries as residents and goods are allowed to be exchanged more freely. Last week, the transport ministers of the 6 GMS countries signed a memorandum of understanding on a number of areas in the cross-border transport facilitation agreement, including routes, the border gates to promote the transit of goods between these countries.
All 6 GMS countries are developing countries and have many similarities. China is pushing its economic restructuring, and many Chinese businesses are investing in Vietnam. That is why this agreement will create more opportunities for business development.
Sau khi mà chúng ta thực hiện cái liên vận quốc tế thì chúng ta khai thác được cái đầu tư hạ tầng là rất tốt. Ngoài ra cái vận tải quốc tế này nó giúp cho hành khách đi lại một cách dễ dàng, đặc biệt là hàng hóa giữa các nước có thể là qua lại một cách nhanh chóng.
During the implementation of the agreement, many goods will be transported by road rather than by sea within the legal framework, allowing many vehicles to transport goods and people across borders. It will reduce logistics costs, and people from the 6 countries will benefit from better transportation.
Infrastructure projects also account for the majority of GMS loans in Vietnam, which is about 5.63 billion US dollars. Would such heavy investment in infrastructure contribute to socioeconomic development in Vietnam?
Well, infrastructure indeed has been probably the most important part of the GMS program, and I would say one of the most successful. The program has been able to actually construct many different roads that have been connecting the region. And just to put you an example, in Vietnam, for example, under the GMS program, there was the development of the road connecting Hanoi with Lao Cai, with China. And that has been connecting, allowed not only faster transportation. Now it takes half of the time that it used to take to travel from Hanoi to the border with China, but also that has been allowing to have much more trade, much more investment, and better connections between Vietnam and its neighbor in China.
Now, in terms of transport infrastructure, Vietnam is part of 5 out of the 9 transport corridors within GMS framework. Has this created an impetus or an advantage for Vietnam to develop its economic activities?
Vietnam is probably the number 1 beneficiary, but also the very active contributor of the GMS program in terms of transportation corridors. And as you are completely correct, most of the corridors of the GMS program, they pass through Vietnam. That has brought huge benefits to Vietnam enterprises that now can actually transport their products to China, to Cambodia, to Laos much faster. They can, to many companies that are exporting, but also has attracted a lot of investment, further investment in areas that before were almost completely closed to trade at the beginning of the program. Now there is very, very dynamic trade.
Now, for the first time, a business forum will be held within the framework of GMS 6 as an initiative by Vietnam as the host country. So how will this impact links between regional and global enterprises?
Well, first of all, we are extremely happy that actually the Prime Minister of Vietnam himself have actually taken the lead on establishing this new initiative, because I think in Vietnam and in the other GMS countries there is a recognition that actually the private sector and businesses must play a much bigger role in the implementation of the GMS program. For that reason, there will be a dialogue in which the leaders of the countries will participate themselves. In that business summit, the leaders and the business have discussed about how they can attract more financing, for example, for infrastructure projects and make that infrastructure much more sustainable. They have also been discussing how to develop the agriculture sector. And I think they have recognized that without the private sector, it will be almost impossible to move forward the agenda.
The first ever Greater Mekong subregion or GMS Business Summit opened on Friday in Hanoi as part of the 6th GMS Summit or GMS 6. The event aimed to enhance dialogues between enterprises and the government and connect businesses in the region and the world.
Cái sáng kiến và tổ chức cái hội nghị này cũng rất là hay. Không có bao giờ ai người ta kinh doanh ở một cái nơi người ta không hiểu gì cả. Thế thì bây giờ đây là một cái cơ hội để cho các cái doanh nghiệp cũng như các quốc gia sẽ tự giới thiệu cái thế mạnh của quốc gia mình hoặc của doanh nghiệp của mình, từ cái việc hiểu nhau và biết được đâu là cái mục tiêu mà mình hướng tới thì mình sẽ tìm ra được những cơ hội.
Delegates to the GMS 6 conference also voiced their opinions for Vietnam's initiative.
We need to involve private sector because we are working on connectivity, on economic linkages, on issue of economic diversification, promoting growth. So private sector is play important role in that regard.
This is very good initiative because in the past there is no this GMS Business Summit. And we think that this will create a good opportunity for the private sector, their business and entrepreneurship.
The GMS Business Forum is of equivalent scale to the APEC Business Summit in 2017. This shows enterprises and investors' positive responses to more open and favorable government policies and confidence in positive business opportunities in the sub-region.
How did GMS program support Vietnam's development since it's joined the program?
Well, we have been supporting not only infrastructure, which has been a very significant part of the program, but we also have worked in many other areas. Just to put again another example, in the area of communicable diseases, the program has supported a program that will enhance the capacity of the provinces, of 13 provinces in Vietnam, especially in the north of Vietnam, on how to deal communicable diseases, how to collaborate better with the other countries, and how to prepare better to this. This is an area in which countries cannot solve the challenges alone. They have to work together, and this is one of the great contributions of the GMS program. There has been other areas, such as tourism, for example. The program has a very important project in the area of Hue and the central region of Vietnam, in which they will support sustainable tourism to ensure that the local population really benefits more from the tourists coming into the country.
And what kind of assistance has been provided by the Asian Development Bank to facilitate cooperation between GMS countries within its framework?
The ADB, the Asian Development Bank, has provided 3 types of support and played 3 key roles. Number one, we mobilize resources. ADB itself has already contributed about $8 billion in projects to the GMS program. But we also have attracted also many other co-financiers, many other partners, development partners, that also they brought their money to the GMS program. The second was to be somehow facilitator of the process, to be what we call it an honest broker. The countries actually had a very good understanding among themselves, but sometimes, you know, it's useful to have also somebody which is neutral, such as the Asian Development Bank, which is also the secretariat of the Greater Mekong Sub-Region Program. We also bring a lot of technical assistance, a lot of knowledge to ensure that the program activities are actually based on real strategies.
After 25 years of economic cooperation within the GMS framework, moving forward, what are the main challenges for GMS cooperation in near and longer term?
Well, the program has been doing very well for the last 25 years, but I think the leaders have recognized that we cannot yet sleep in our laurels, as is generally said. There are a number of challenges which are still significant, although the program has already built the bigger infrastructure and the main roads connecting the region. It is still very important, for example, to actually link the different modes of transport, link better the roads with the ports and with the airports, and multimodal connectivity. It is also important to develop other modes of transport, such as railways, and even to connect also the people in the rural areas with the smaller roads, feeder roads that connect to the bigger roads. Another example is, of course, agriculture. Although agriculture has done progress significantly also, it is very important that the countries work together and cooperate to ensure that they have agriculture products that are resilient to climate change, and that they use the latest technologies in agriculture sector to ensure that it's becoming productive, because competition is very high these days.
The 6th Greater Mekong Sub-Region or GMS-6 Summit concluded in Hanoi on Saturday, March the 31st. The GMS-6 adopted the Hanoi Action Plan and the GMS Regional Investment Framework 2022, providing a platform for countries to strengthen their cooperation through continuous innovation. These 2 documents are aimed to sharpen focus on the GMS program's goals of enhancing connectivity, competitiveness and community in the sub-region. At the same time, GMS countries have identified a new pipeline of projects worth $66 billion under the GMS Regional Investment Framework. These projects will expand economic prosperity by developing cross-border transport and energy infrastructure. what are the GMS6 priorities and what's new on the agenda for this year in order to overcome existing challenges and build on future cooperation?
The priorities that have been approved by the leaders are all stated in the Hanoi Action Plan. Actually, the GMS program has a good strategic framework that was approved by the leaders about 5 years ago. And the leaders think that the program is already moving in the correct direction. They didn't want to have very radical changes, but however, they wanted to ensure that we focus on delivering real results. And that's why they make adjustments to the priorities of each of the sectors. For example, in the power connectivity, they emphasize that while it's important to continue building power interconnection, the hardware of power interconnectivity, it's also very important to work together on improving the regulations and the rules that will allow the transport of electricity from one country, country number 1, to country number 2 and country number 3. They also thought that it was very important to work on the regulations for transportation. While, as I said, the program is very successful building the hardware of infrastructure, building the roads, building the railways, that's not enough. The leader said you also need to keep working under the program to deliver results in terms of regulations that really will allow a smooth movement of trucks and cars and tourists and products across borders.
Now, besides the Hanoi Action Plan, as you've mentioned, this year's summit also adopted the Regional Investment Framework. Now, how will this development contribute to cooperation in this sub-region?
Well, the Greater Mekong subregion is a program is very famous because it's not just an empty talk show. It's something that has been delivering concrete results with concrete projects. And this is what the Regional Investment Framework is. The Regional Investment Framework is a document that it has to be understood together with the Hanoi Action Plan. The Hanoi Action Plan explains what the program should do, but the Regional Investment Framework includes a list of specific projects for many $billion of projects that will be the reality of what the program will actually be doing. And it's actually, I think it's great that the leaders have been able to adopt this document. We demonstrate the commitment of the 6 countries to keep working together to deliver concrete results with concrete projects. The leaders have approved $66 billion in terms of the total amount of projects that will be expected to be delivered for the next 5 years until the year 2022. We believe that a lot of this money still is going towards infrastructure, especially construction of roads, but now there are a lot of railways, for example, again, power interconnections, developing of urban areas. All these will have very significant impacts on the population of the region. I think this will open, again, even more opportunities for trade, for investment, for the movement of tourists, which should really benefit the people that are on the ground.
Well, thank you so much for joining our show.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
As leaders from the Mekong region gathered in Hanoi this week for the GMS6, the events highlighted the close relationship between Vietnam and its neighbors, while forging links between regional and global firms. Furthermore, the adoption of the Hanoi Action Plans and the GMS Regional Investment Framework as part of the summit should contribute to greater cooperation to build a region of prosperity, integration, and sustainable development in the coming years. And that's wrapped up this edition of BizLine. In the meantime, you can log on to vtv4.vn or our YouTube channel at VTV4Go for more of our programs and updates. Don't forget to join us next week for another episode of BizLine. Thank you for watching, and until next time.